Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Nerds with Friends. My name is Cody Leach. As always, I'm joined by Christian Garcia.
Hola.
And joining us via Zoom, we're all in the Zoomverse today. We got artist Richard Whitters joining us. We're so excited to have you, Richard.
Hey, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're super excited. We can't wait to talk about some of the things you've worked on and some of the things you're working on coming up as well. Um, uh, as a brief little intro, and we'll get into it more in just a minute. Richard has worked for Wizards of the Coast for quite a while in the past, and then now he's working on his own RPG system, which we'll for sure go into full depth on. So we're super juiced to have you. We'll get all the little podcasty stuff out of the way. Please like and subscribe. Make sure you follow and do all the little followy buttons. It really helps us out. And check out patreon.com/nerdswithfriends. Helps support the show and get us things like these cool virtual backgrounds that we have, and which are free. But anyway, we'll start the show as we always do, where we do a few nerdy confessions, where we confess the things that make us nerds. Christian, why don't you lead us off?
So I don't think we've talked about Zelda yet, right? So
I don't think so, but I'm going to talk about it too. So let's do.
so my nerdy confession is I usually try to go through a game and figure out the puzzles. I try not to get help. I always try to at least once through. And I being Nintendo and most of the games are usually like they're supposed to be like kid friendly. I figured, yeah, I'll get through this easy.
I'm smarter than a child.
Yeah, no, it turns out I'm not.
Yeah.
There's been a couple like of the dungeons where I love puzzles and I love figuring out, but like if I'm spending an hour
Yeah.
and I just like, okay, I don't know what to do, and I've just been hitting up YouTube for hints on how to figure out the puzzles, and it's always so frustrating once you see it's like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, just stupid.
I'll
Like,
admit I've had a few of those too, where I'm like, man, I can't figure out what's going on here. And I look it up on like IGN or something, and you scroll into it, you're like, and then pick up this thing. I'm like, oh, that makes, and then I throw the phone away, and then I actually figure out the rest of it.
I didn't get any help at all. I would have figured that out eventually.
I would have figured that out. I just need someone to like point me in the right direction. But yeah, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom out now. It's definitely a great reason to own a Nintendo Switch, if not one of the only reasons.
It's the only game I've played on the Scratch. It was the first Zelda.
It was the first game that I played on Switch, and it's like this also like the second or third game I played on Switch. But it's incredible. And we'll probably do a full episode on it once we've kind of like really gotten into it. Maybe not beaten it because it takes a while to get into it, but we'll do a full episode on it. But man, I've been trying to put some hours in on that game. It is real fun.
It's fun, and like one of my new favorite things is now looking at what people are building. So in the game you get a couple devices and you can kind of glue items together, and just seeing what people have put together is hilarious.
Yeah.
Cody showed me a good one.
Yeah, what's so funny is there's mechanics in it where you can take little pieces of rocks and boards and planks and stuff laying around and fuse them together with these like engine parts that will do certain motion. So like there's fans that propel you this way, there's rockets, there's lights and flamethrowers and all sorts of stuff, and people have been building incredible like robots and mechs and stuff like that. It's amazing what a bunch of nerds with unlimited time on their hands can really figure out.
Sounds amazing.
It's fun. I mean, and it's beautiful. Like as a fan of video games, it's easy to get caught up in like, okay, the Nintendo Switch is a low, it's 1080p, maybe 30 frames a second, hardware piece. So it's way behind the curve when it comes to modern video games. But to still have a game that's that beautiful, where you're just lost in the world of Hyrule, playing as Link, going around and adventuring. It's like, it goes to show how powerful like the story and world of a video game can be, where like I can deal with crappy performance on this like system that is not up to snuff because the game is that amazing. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah, can't wait to play some more of it tonight.
Yeah, I always get curious about puzzles in games, especially video games,
Yep.
because it is so you can so readily just look it up
Yeah.
and be like, I found that with Skyrim a lot. It's like,
Sure.
oh, I'm in this spot. Like, what is it? Like, it's like whale, wolf, whatever,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like I could figure it out, but just look it up.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
think,
even that's simple, but
yeah, I think, it's one of those things where you can either kind of self-regulate, where like me and Christian, we try not to look it up if we can, because
yep,
part of the joy of it is figuring it out on your own. But if you get in a jam, it's amazing that we have these resources now. Like, we're all old enough where, like, back in the day, you had to get like the next issue of Nintendo Power to like walk you through
yeah,
a level. You're like,
yeah,
oh, how did I
I
get
remember there was
a water temple on Ocarina of Time or whatever?
I remember there was a phone number that you
Yeah.
could call for
Yeah,
Nintendo games.
yeah, tips
Oh
and
yeah,
tricks or whatever. You can call them up and be like, "Yo, I'm stuck on level 3. How do I get past the dragon or whatever?" I mean, it's amazing. Thinking back on that, it's so crazy how far video games have come. Because yeah, you used to have to like look up cheat codes or whatever in a magazine that came out once every 2 months or whatever, and now
yep.
it's everything is just even the day the game comes out, there's like, oh, here's all the secret things we found. Here's all solutions to all puzzles. It's like, my God, it's incredible.
Yeah, yeah. It's just immediately just cracked and out there, so
Yeah,
it's there.
100%.
So you have to like ignore the temptation or
Yeah,
just get
exactly.
frustrated and go like, ah, what is
Yeah, exactly. You
that?
gotta have a little willpower.
Yep.
Well, we've both been playing Zelda. Richard, what's a nerdy confession for you? Is there something new you've been trying out, or some sort of new
Um.
nerdy thing you got into?
My nerdy thing has been really the game we've been working on because I
Sure.
haven't had because it's pretty much like sort of I have my regular work. I work at Larian Studios right now. Um, and then I'll come home and like work on this stuff. And I talk to my buddy Matthew Walsh, who's working with me. Um, and we've been friends for like years and years and years, and a couple of other old friends of mine. So we do that. But I do have to say my what I do like to do is there's a lot of games that I like to go on and just listen to let's plays and
Sure.
things like that. Like, and it's weird. And I try to find the ones that have just a ton of episodes. Like there's a few streamers out there who do Sunless Sea,
Okay.
and it has the crazy awesome like dialogue, and it's really you're putting around in a little boat. It's like a
Nice.
top view, and it's like and it's kind of steampunky Cthulhu-y a little bit,
Oh,
and
okay.
it's got crazy dialogue. So it's like I'll listen to those types of things. And there was one I found a while ago. I think the streamer's name was Sips or something like that, but he had a bunch of streams on Fallout, like the original, and I
Oh,
remember
okay.
playing it like way back in the day, like Fallout 1.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he did a big long stream of that. So that's one of my little addictions. If I find those and I see someone like, oh, 80 episodes of just
Yeah.
walking through Fallout 1, I'm like, yes. Like I'll listen to
That,
the whole thing.
that's my favorite, is when you find something new that you can like binge. Like, oh my God, I've missed out on this entire thing. And there's,
Mhm.
8 seasons or 80 episodes or whatever. It's like I love jumping into something like that, because it's, now, speaking of like everything being instantly available, with the streaming and everything, it's like going back to watching The Mandalorian, one episode a week, and
Yeah.
then you got to wait a year and a half till the next one comes out. It's like, oh, this is the worst. But if I
Yeah.
go back and find like, oh, you know what? There was this sci-fi show from the early 2000s that I never watched before. Let me just jump into that, and it's like 6 seasons long or whatever, and it's really fun to be able to see all of it at once.
Yeah. Yeah. My friend Pat is the old movie aficionado
Yeah.
amongst us. He always sends me links to like old radio shows
Oh,
or like old movies. Like the other day, he was telling me about the Sinbad movie with Lou Ferrigno. And I was
Okay.
like,
The Incredible
I've
Hulk.
never seen that. And he's like, here's where you can watch it. And I was like, oh, okay.
That's crazy. I wonder if that was before the Hulk. Maybe that was what kind of like made him a known guy or something. Because I actually
I'm not sure.
I got to see
Yeah.
Lou Ferrigno at WonderCon here in San Francisco years ago now. But
Yeah.
he's a big man for sure. I can see why he played the Hulk for sure.
I think I saw him once at San Diego Comic Con.
Yeah.
But I didn't, I didn't say hi or anything.
You don't want to make him angry.
Yeah, exactly. But he still had like a big line and a lot of people. Like he's very recognized.
Absolutely. And he had I was just watching it the other day. The movie I Love You Man. He has like a little cameo in it as himself. And I think that kind of reintroduced him to a lot of people because it was what's his name, Paul Rudd movie, and everyone kind of really liked that one. But he's a big dude, and apparently a very nice man as well. So
yeah, I've heard that too.
If you're that size, you're just gonna scare the hell out of everyone.
Just become a murderer or something. All right, cool. Well, let's me and Christian have obviously some like guilty questions about like you working at Wizards of the Coast because we love it so much. So before we take our little break, we thought we'd just ask you, what was your experience working with them? What kind of projects did you work on? Because you worked on both Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And so I actually, I that was a loaded question. It's a podcasting setup because I actually have 2 of your cards.
Oh, there we go.
Jin-Gitaxias and Vorinclex.
Yep.
I will say your artwork is very expensive. These were quite a bit. I was lucky enough where I pulled them from a booster pack, but they are expensive cards nowadays for sure.
I've been informed of that. I thought I think Tom Gencott, who's one of the art directors at Wizards, is who was pulling the artwork for that because that art is the old original concept art I did 100,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And he'd sent me an email and he was like, hey, we're thinking of using this art on these cards. And I was like, that sounds awesome. But I didn't realize they were for the Phyrexian set. Like they're very collectible cards. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's funny because this one was actually from Kamigawa, which was a more recent set, and then this one was from Kaldheim, I think. Kaldheim. And I will say, the Phyrexian will be one, which was the set that they're featured prominently in recently. It was cool, and they had some interesting artwork too. It was kind of like an ink splatter thing, but I gotta say this concept art makes them look even more like I don't know, menacing and whatnot. I really, really enjoy it. So when you're designing a card like that, do they kind of give you any direction, or are you just like kind of free to do what you want, or they say like, well, it's a blue card, so maybe throw some blue in there kind of thing?
There's a well to kind of start from the beginning of it.
Sure.
Like I was basically on Magic for 7 years, and then I was on D&D for another 7 years. So I was exactly split between both brands, but I started on Magic. And I gotta watch myself of not being
Yeah, that's okay. We've been podcasting for like 10 years now. We still throw a bunch of those in. It's fine.
I'll just laugh at myself when I do it. So there we go. About when I started on Magic, I was a concept artist, and it was sort of I have to say it scared the heck out of me because I was I'd been drawing for a long time and done a lot of art and things like that, but it was actually like, you're the lead concept artist, and I was like, I don't know what that means. Like,
Sure.
I don't know. It started out. But the first concept push I was on, I think it was Wayne Reynolds and Brian Chippy Dugan. I forget who else was on that one, but I remember those 2 guys kind of saw me through it. because the concept pushes were the things we'd have to kind of create these new worlds.
Gotcha.
So we'd be like, okay, we're gonna do New Phyrexia, we're gonna do Zendikar, we're gonna do, and you'd kind of bring in a group of artists, and it would be a small group, usually like 4 to 6,
Mhm.
and visually just start figuring out what it's gonna be. So to get, so with that bit of context, to get back to your question, there were definitely things that we looked at when you're on a concept push that you try to keep in mind, right?
Yeah.
Like if you give a creature wings, and that's going to go on a card, people will expect that card to have flying,
Sure.
you know,
Makes sense.
like
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And the undead and the zombies and all that stuff are usually in black,
Right. Exactly.
and this and that kind of thing. And we had sort of a chart, you know, so it would be like, you know, like flyers, and you basically had like soldier, flyer, archer kind of thing, and then you had blue, green, red, white, black, or the Wooburg colors and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And we would kind of have a graph and write in some ideas. So it'd be like, oh, well, the Sphinx kind of goes here
Yeah.
in blue, or this world might have a Sphinx here. And basically, the artists would start looking at that very simple kind of cross-reference chart and thinking about the world that we were dealing with, and just start coming up with ideas, because that chart wasn't, it was really there just to let your brain stew.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really prescriptive. It was like, you could do anything here, but
Yeah.
here's some things to ground you.
Some ideas to kind of like lead you down a path, kind of.
Yes. Yep.
That's awesome.
Yes. Yeah, it's very fun. And then typically you'd have the artists, generally we'd have, you know, at least 1 or 2 people who were stronger with like environment kind of stuff.
Got it. Yeah.
And then you have maybe 2 or 3 people who are really good with characters and creatures,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. And people would kind of land on something, and everyone would just go, that's really cool, let's build on top of that. And then we'd basically just follow that process of like working with each other and building on stuff.
Very cool. And so
Yeah.
did you also do the concept for Elesh Norn? The first
Yeah.
Elesh? Nice. How did that kind of idea come about? Because that's one of my favorite cards of the recent years, kind of thing.
There were a bunch of things. Like there was some of the white porcelain kind of thing.
Yeah.
That was in the initial concept push, I believe. So we were talking about, okay, white will have this sort of porcelainy feel.
Yeah.
There was a part of it. I remember I was talking to Mary Kolkowski, who was an art director on the D&D team at the time. We're friends of mine. So I was talking to Mary, and she had mentioned something. We were talking about this white porcelain, or we were talking about those old sinks that would be like in your grandmother's place, or in like those old shops, and how when they got chipped, when the white porcelain got chipped, there was like this black looking iron underneath it.
Oh, that's
right.
awesome.
And we were like, I was just like, oh, that's cool. And I kind of like, I ran back to my desk, and I was like, this takes them, they're not, it makes it a little less sci-fi, and gives
Yeah.
a little more like organic, you feel some of that chipping.
Right.
So it was sort of a mixture. There's a lot of people who've asked me that too. It's like, oh, you designed Elesh Norn and you designed this, and it's like, yeah, all the Praetors I designed, you know, and a lot of them I was just looking at silhouettes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But for me, it's really hard to separate it from like our whole team who did stuff.
Of course.
Yeah, it's like a band, you know, like it's like a garage band. You know, like you did this stuff. So they're like, oh, did you make that song? And it's like, oh, I did the vocals.
We made that song. Yeah.
Yeah. I've
been in plenty of bands. I know. Even though there is sometimes one guy who thinks that he did it by himself, there.
Yes.
A lot of times it's a team effort.
Yeah.
Is there is there any artwork or any time where people will design something and it's like, all right, this is maybe too, like, I'm hesitant to use the word gross, or maybe this is like a little, maybe I think we're going too far on this, where like they'll nix the idea and it's like, no, we can't do that. So I'm just remembering like when Magic started, like I think there was one that had the
Oh yeah, it
the
had like
star symbol, or I forgot what it was.
pentagram on it or
Yeah,
something.
pentagram.
Mm-hmm.
So is there like, or do artists ever purposely like, yeah, I just want to throw this in there because I know no one's gonna like this, like just see how people will react.
Well, we had a few. There's a few guidelines that you just kind of do that we had over the years, kind of thing. Like we try not to use real world religious symbols,
Mm-hmm.
for
Sure.
example, or an existing, practice religion and things like that. And we had certain kind of lines. Um, a lot of times we didn't like. There weren't like a lot of guidelines besides the fact of what the artist kind of wanted to do,
Sure.
so it wasn't really, it was more like the artists themselves would probably go so far, but and you might do something every once in a while where you're like, ooh, ugh.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's too far. I remember specifically with the Phyrexians, it was basically like gore, metal, blood, viscera,
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was a point where I called Doug Beyer over, who was a writer I worked with there on Magic. And I was just like, is this too gory? Because I've completely lost my sense of it, because we've been doing Phyrexian stuff for like months now. And
Yeah.
I'm just desensitized. Like, is this
Yeah.
too gross? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, and let's talk a little bit about D&D too. I mean, it's D&D and Magic have kind of for a long time been kind of hand in hand, being both at the same company.
Yep.
But how was that different when you switched over to them? It seems to me, if I was to guess, I'd say that they probably have a more fleshed out idea of the story and characters needed for you to draw. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, there was actually part of that when I came over to D&D. It was sort of bringing some of that concepting type of idea into D&D.
Mm-hmm.
So that was actually part of one of the things that I was bringing over, because D&D was kind of had a model, and I think it worked fine that way too. But the original model for D&D stuff was basically you have a book, you write the book, and then out of that you get sort of the art descriptions of like, we need a picture of this character, we need a map of this, we need that type of thing. So when I came over, I sort of brought in like a front end of working, like it started with working with Chris Perkins, and Adam Lee, who Adam Lee was another one of the writers there at the time. And we would just jam on ideas, and I'd be like, okay, we'll talk about the story. I'll draw a bunch of stuff, and at the time too, I knew tons of concept artists, so I'd be like, oh, I'll commission some stuff. I'll get somebody to do some environment concepts and all that stuff. So we started kind of fleshing out the ideas before we ever even got to a book.
Gotcha.
Like before you got to like a manuscript, I should say. So I sort of brought that aspect in, which was really great at like working with Chris Perkins and Adam. When I first moved over to D&D, Adam Lee, like that was so fun.
Yeah.
Like that was, yeah, we would just hang out. We'd go get a cup of tea, maybe go to the hotel next door and hang out in their lobby. They had like couches and stuff there. We'd chat and that kind of thing and just talk about ideas. So yeah, that was that sort of thing. And early on too, they were like, I kind of came over when they're in the midst of creating the core books.
Sure.
And that was one of the things too, where they're like, oh, Richard could do some pencil drawings and we could use them here and here and here. And I was like, sure. So I basically, talked to Chris Perkins. Like Chris and I just talked about, oh, what kind of stuff do you want? And we just talked about a few ideas.
Yeah.
I'd do these little pencil sketches. He'd put either smiley face or frowny face, which that's awesome. Be like, oh, frowny face. And I was just like, okay, well, let's do something else. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
So that was another very fun part too. Like basically just like pencil sketches, make fun stuff,
Yeah.
and I'm an old school D&D nerd, so I like that sort of feeling of the the little nods to like the old stuff.
I think I know which sketches you're talking about in the book. I think there's one where there's like an ogre.
Speaking of old stuff, look,
Club.
I do have
Oh,
oh, it's backwards, but I
oh
do
yeah.
have the advanced D&D player's handbook, and it is fun to kind of like go back to art of, oh god,
Oh
of
yeah, yeah.
Excalibur kind of thing. It doesn't show very
The
good.
paladin.
Yeah, and it's funny to see how far it's come, but I like the idea of, doing the pencil sketches and stuff to kind of keep it in tradition of kind of the old black and white, original books. So that's awesome. And I mean, working on the core books like the Player's Handbook and the Monster Manual and Dungeon Master's Guide. I mean, everyone who plays D&D has those or some version of those, so that's pretty cool. All right.
Yeah, the big
Well,
one too was
oh, yeah.
I did all the conditions, so
Ooh,
those get on the inside of the DM screen. And I think the first one we did had Tyler Jacobson did the big red dragon on the front.
oh, okay, cool.
Then my little drawings were all on the inside of it, and that still to this day nerds me out a little bit because I see people, they're playing live games or something. They show the DM screen. I'm like, "There's my drawings."
Yeah,
You know?
there it is, right there inside.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's super fun.
Awesome. Well, here, we'll take a quick little break, and then after we come
Yeah.
back from the break, we'll talk about the RPG that you're actually creating. All right?
All
So
right.
we'll be right back. And we're back. It's kind of how we do a fun little break in the podcast world. We don't actually go anywhere or do anything, but now hopefully someone has found out about some cool new product they can buy and help support the show.
Or smart water.
Or smart water. It could be smart water. We don't know. It has been smart water apparently on the last couple of weeks. So if it is, enjoy smart water. That sounds great. So now you've kind of talked about your experience working at Wizards of the Coast, and now on nights and weekends you've been designing your own RPG system, and it sounds like you've been doing it working on it for quite a while. Is that about right?
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been some months now.
Yeah.
Months now. And I think what predates the sort of game itself is this little world that my friend Matt and I have been toying around with. So that goes all the way back like 30 years.
Sure.
Kind of thing. Like
started as a homebrew.
Oh yeah, totally a homebrew kind of thing. Back when we played together in high school and stuff, like me and a bunch of friends. And of course, just over the years, I think it's a thing that's kept us connected. Matt might say it kept him annoyed. Like I call him all the time, like, "Oh, I had an idea," like, I had an idea for something. But yeah, it was really just this thing that over the years, it was sort of our little world, and we're like, "Oh, we keep building on it." And as we kept going, it would evolve, and we'd sort of be like, "Oh, maybe this could be different, or that could be a cool thing." So mainly it was kind of the world, and then as far as the system, basically we were both sort of targeting that sort of like we just wanted to have a game where you could make a cool character and then play really quickly.
Yeah.
But there were still some things we wanted, like being able to sort of advance or level up your character and things like that.
That's important. Yep.
So I think we've gone through just like a billion iterations. And we've tested a bunch of versions and things like that and tried out a bunch of things. And I think the system works really well. The system to me is sort of like, if we've done it kind of correctly, it's closer to Invisible You know what I mean?
Nice. Yeah.
And then
So you
and then
don't
it's
actually
really
feel it. You don't feel like you're being restricted as much by it as you're being helped along by it.
yes, yeah. It's not like burdensome. Like, oh, you better keep the 800-page rule book here. Like
Yeah.
it's definitely not like a system like that. So really, the part we're working on now is getting like the flavor and the ideas that we want in it. So,
Yeah,
yep,
I think that's that's a something that indeed D&D has done their own version of this where compared to that old rule book that I just showed, fifth edition is a much more accessible game, right? And I think that has done a lot of work getting people who never tried a tabletop RPG to try it, right? But even
yep,
fifth edition, and this is, I'm currently DMing a game with Christian, Christian's playing in it as well. But with like 3 practically brand new players. 2 of them have never played any tabletop RPG before. One of them played like 2 or 3 sessions, and even when we're doing like the adventure, right, the Lost Mines of Phandelver right out of the starter kit, it's still a lot to have to like explain to someone, and a lot of times you do feel like some of the system is getting in the way of them just really having a fun time. So I
yeah,
found even myself, I'm like, okay, don't worry about how many bag items you have in your bag, just whatever is within reason. Like, don't worry about spell components, like as long as you can talk and move your hands or whatever, that's all you need. And
yeah,
I can definitely see the appeal of having kind of a game system where it's more about telling the story and having a good time than it is about like crunchy numbers kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. We really tried to make it like a modular sort of approach,
Nice.
because what we wanted was well, our sort of beginning character generation. Well, there's a way to do it. Well, default, it's kind of random. You can randomly roll a bunch of
Okay.
stuff and see what your character is. But of course, those are random charts, and it doesn't break the game if you just pick. Like, oh, I want to do this and that and that. You can just pick. It doesn't matter. Um, but we had that kind of thing. We both like this idea of like sort of an emergent character. Uh, that even some aspects we found most people were kind of doing it maybe 50-50, where it's like I pick some things I want for my character, like I do want to do this and I do want to do that, but I'm going to roll some other things randomly.
Yeah.
um and then you sort of have this, we have sort of a classless system, but we try to keep it kind of organized. So there's basically talents that you can have that are sort of like martial talents, and then there's a 3 different types of sort of like magic, that
Okay.
you can pick, choose, mix, match, do whatever you want. And there's some example stuff of like, well, if you were making a class, they're kind of examples in the world, but you can build your own character as you go. You can evolve them, and
Nice.
basically, kind of as your character grows, you can make them into whatever you want. Really, that was kind of the target.
So you're not labeled into one class, like you're not a fighter and you only have access to like fighter abilities, or just like a monk and you only have access. You can just kind of pick as you're leveling up.
Yep, yep.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
basically, so far each level you basically get 3 points. We're calling them iron, you
Yeah.
know. So you get 3 points, and there are different talents that cost 1, 2, or 3.
Oh,
Right. So you
okay.
could take, yeah. So you could take a 3 talent, a 3 iron talent, which is probably pretty powerful. 2 iron and a 1 iron, which is
Yeah.
a mixture, or you could take a 1, 1, 1, which are probably 3 little interesting but not powerful things.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of reminds me of a game that just came out. The Star Wars Jedi Survivor has a
Hmm.
similar progression system where it's like, you can save up skill points from your experience points, and it's like,
Yep.
okay, do I want to bank it up for 3 and then spend it on something really cool, or can I not wait that long and I want to spend 1s and 2s all over the place? So
Yep.
I
Nickel
think
and
it's a
dime.
good system for sure.
Yep. Yeah. And what we were looking for too is sort of this. There was another thing we were kind of looking at, because we wanted to have that sort of pulp sword and sorcery feel a little bit, or some of that pulp actiony feel. So for me, a big thing was it's like Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. Like Fafhrd was pretty much a straight up barbarian in the books, but he had possibly some of this frost magic because he was this northern magic and his mother was sort of a witch. The Grey Mouser was a thief, if you call it in D&D terms, but he dabbled in magic. You have other characters like Solomon Kane, who is a swordsman, but he also mixed this bit of magic in and stuff.
Yeah.
So and then Conan's pretty much like, I hate magic, so we're like, okay, you should be able to play just a pure fighter too. So we were looking at that and just saying, like, we want something that allows anyone to kind of emulate characters like that and build them themselves. Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool because picking a character in D&D is always the hardest decision, right? Like, I feel most of the time the session zeros end up lasting longer than any of the session 1s or 2s or 3s. And it's always like, well, maybe I could be like a Hexblade warlock because I really like the idea of using a sword, but I also want to use magic. And if I become a fighter, then I can't really use magic. And the paladin can only be like really good and virtuous. I don't really want to do that. And so it's like you're always kind of like filtered into these little boxes.
Well, it's a big commitment because you're committing to that character for the whole campaign.
And I think for new players especially, that's a huge decision. You don't know like what it's going to be like playing a monk for 3 levels or 4 levels or whatever through an adventure. And so, like, as you start playing, you might find out you're like, oh, I don't really like being a cleric anymore. I'm just sitting in the back healing people as they're having all the fun. It would be cool to be able to get up there and in the fray and really fight some guys and stuff too. So I like the versatility of a system like that. That sounds fun. Well, tell us a little bit about, like, you said it started from a homebrew set, like a setting that you had kind of come up with in a world that you had built up. What is it like? Is it similar, like high fantasy as like Dungeons and Dragons, or does it have like some spin on it kind of thing?
Some steampunk.
Well, this is the thing we've been going back and forth. We basically have there's actually like 2 ages of it.
Okay.
So there is sort of the Ruttigers kind of game that we're making now is basically the sword and sorcery fantasy kind of age.
Got it.
And then there's sort of a next age that comes after that, which we call Witchcog.
Okay.
And that gets into more steampunk, like they get flintlock guns and things like that.
Like that.
So and of course it's basically just me and Matt, and we're making stuff, and I'm terrible at sort of like dithering back and forth because I'm like, maybe we should do this one first and save this one for after, or maybe we should do this one first.
Yeah.
So basically been doing them both. The main thing we've been working on is the system to make sure that because a big thing we had, like I was saying to you, basically when I started at Wizards working on Magic, working on D&D, the main thing I did for like my entire 14 years there was world building.
Yeah.
Right. So a big part of this was sort of 2 focuses. One of them was, can we make sort of a game that's not only good where players can have a lot of agency over how they make their characters, how their characters grow, but also DMs can use it, quite easily. They can run it quite easily. It's easy to make a game. But also the other layer of this whole modular kind of design thing allows people to make their own settings.
Sure.
Right. So it's sort of like, oh, I want a world where there's these crazy things and you can just mix and match parts, because even the monsters are sort of modular, have like modular components.
Nice.
So that was a big thing for me, because I was like, okay, I've been world building for years. I want a tool where I can make a world, like where I can just start and do that kind of thing. And another thing we were talking about when we were talking about the advancement of characters, there's also an interesting thing that we want to see how it plays out as well, where it's like like we have a big part of our world where it's just like an undead kind of wasteland, of course,
Right.
you know.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. So we assume that characters are headed that way, and as they make their way there, they can buy these talents. They're probably going to buy talents that have to do with like combating the undead and all this kind of thing.
Sure.
So we really like that idea of like your character and what they can do will probably reflect the stories that they live through,
Yes.
you know.
And I think that's a good point that a lot of people don't really pay attention to if they're a new DM in any RPG game. Is like, it is important to kind of tell your players ahead of time, like, here's the kind of world we're going to be in, right? You know, if you're playing, Curse of Strahd,
Yep.
it might be a good idea to do some undead type stuff, right? Because you're fighting vampires and whatnot.
Yep.
But maybe not the best thing, like, animal friendship might not be as popular in that, so I think that's kind of cool. And I think that, if you were to take a character that someone had played for, a year through a campaign, and you look at the
Yep.
skills they've had, that will kind of show you what kind of setting they were in. So I like that a lot.
Nah,
Yes.
Curse of Strahd, you're gonna get a ranger, and your favorite enemy is gonna be giant, like
Yeah.
something completely useless.
Yep. That's what we kind of liked about this system, was that it was flexible like that, where it's like we're like, we know something's coming, and you can sort of ramp up to it. Another thing we kind of added into, we put in a few things. Like we made sort of a chapter generator, we call it. We're working on it right now, which is sort of like just the thing where a DM, like, say you're stuck for thinking of what game could you run, next week or whatever. It's basically like a pulp novel chapters name generator.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
So you can roll some things and be, oh, the cavern of the Crimson Skull Queen or something.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Like find your porn star name or whatever online,
Yes.
and it just auto generates, and it's like, it's, for me, like improv is a big part of the role playing experience, and having something like that you can roll on really quickly actually helps me out a lot, because I'm good once I have a prompt. But if I'm just trying to think of something off the top of my head, I can be completely stuck for a while.
Yes. Yeah. And we've had that too with like some of the character generation stuff too.
Yeah.
Like I had one of my players, he was like, or play testers, he was like, I want to play a goblin, sort of a necromancer. And I'm like, okay, well, that stuff's right there. He rolled some random stuff, and a little random item he got was like a skull.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's cool, because I want to be a necromancer. And then he rolled a little thing that we call like a witching or a witch mark. And it's like, oh, the skull can actually speak to you.
Oh, nice.
Nobody else can hear it, but you hear it. And it's like, okay.
I love that.
And then he took a little spell where he was like, well, one of the spells I want is to summon a skeleton once per day. Just summon a little minion skeleton. And it's like, okay. So he put that all together, where it's like, okay, this skull is like my goblin uncle who was a necromancer too, and we chat, but nobody else can hear us chatting.
Oh,
and when he summons the skeleton, he summons the whole skeleton except the head. And then he puts his uncle's skull on it.
That's awesome.
That's
none
cool.
of that was dictated by the game. It's really just, you give people prompts and they start putting it together, and I love that part. Yeah,
that's so cool. And I really like the idea of having two different time settings in the same universe, same world. I think that's something that hasn't been done super well in the past from a lot. Dungeons and Dragons has had what's the Spelljammers, so it's like kind of but it does feel like it's its own kind of thing. And then like there's Pathfinder and Starfinder, which again feels very separate, but it would be very cool to see like a world that has progressed an age or whatever into the future. It reminds me a lot of the fantasy series Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, where the first book is very kind of sword and sorcery castles kind of thing. And then the next one takes place, 200, 300 years in the future. And it's at the verge of industrial revolution where there's steam powered cars and people have revolvers and things like that. But same world, same power set, with just some new modern additions to it. And then it's in the works. There's going to be a third in the space age kind of thing on the same, which is very interesting, to see how that kind of stuff progresses.
Yeah, and that's something right now that we're figuring out, because we're even talking about it this week, where it's like, do we the main thing we've been working towards is just the playtest doc.
Sure.
But we wanted, with the playtest doc, to make sure that we did a good, what you would call like a vertical slice, which is basically, can you make a complete character? Can you have enough levels so people can really try it out? Do you have some monsters, and of course maps, and I have to do some fun drawings,
of course.
So it was sort of like, okay, we need a good enough vertical slice, and really at that point too, it'd be like, well, people have most of the system at that point. We're like, that's okay, because we aren't. It's not really about the system as much as it's about like the fun additions and random charts and crazy places that you can visit. So that's a part we've been working on. But yeah, deciding that one final thing of like, well, do we come out with like sort of the fantasy sword and sorcery first, and then do the sort of next age as sort of an addition? Do we kind of mix them together? So that's something we're still dithering about, and it's mostly my fault.
I mean, it's a tough decision, but it's like, I can see your point though, where it's like, I think it would be really fun to release both of them at the same time, but also like narratively, it'd be kind of cool to start in the sword and sorcery and then kind of move into the more steampunky one. But I know I'd be stuck on that decision too. So
that's the advice I'll give you. It's like, it's hard working with friends, and it's really hard working with friends if they're me.
Yeah. Exactly. When it comes to like making a decision, it sounds like you're not the guy to ask, huh?
Let the artist figure out. It's like, I don't know, maybe one more.
That's why I run, all the technical stuff of the podcast, and him being the artist, he brings his winning personality to the show.
I can't be held responsible for decisions, man.
Yeah, exactly.
No, genius. You can't.
Yeah, you can't tether genius. Yeah. So where are you? You said you're about to start playtesting, or you're getting close to that. What, do you guys have a timeline that you're trying to get out? Like, are you trying to release this next year, or is it still kind of like waiting and seeing how the playtest goes? Like, where are you in the process of making the game?
I would say at this point we have like sort of the core engine down, so you can create a character, you can go through, like we sort of leveling up. We have a few things we're doing to address like leveling up and advancement. Like you can basically go to 10th level.
Okay.
But at that point you stop getting hit points, your saving throw stops going up, that kind of stuff. So your character caps out a little bit there, but you can continue to get essentially more of that, more iron or whatever, to still advance your character, but it doesn't blow up the system to be like, I'm 30th level and now I have 800,000 hit points,
Yeah, that's something that I never really considered before, is that, like, I guess, use D&D as an example. You get to level 20 and yes, you're basically a god fighting, adventurer at that point. But, at that point, there's nowhere else to go, really. I think getting to level 10 and then just getting more feats and, other abilities and stuff, I think that is a fun way of doing it. And to keep it kind of wrangled in where you don't have to make, your enemies, 1,000 hit points or whatever to make it some sort of challenge, so.
Yeah. So that first phase of like you can go from level 1 to 10, we have that solid, you know.
Nice.
The next phase after that, we're still working on some things, but we want to put things in there too, like when you break level 10, you still get these points, but what can you put them towards? It's like, well, you could start making your own thieves guild, that kind of thing. Or if when you get advanced more, it's like, oh, you can start the road to become a lich or become a
Cool.
Valkyrie,
Okay.
right?
Very cool.
So basically slowly put points into it. So we start out with no class, but then later we have some of those things called, we're calling them embraces right now.
Gotcha.
So like a lich would be like embrace death, you know?
Got it.
Like,
Very cool.
yeah. So your character, but we're trying to give it this sort of character arc
Yeah.
where you start out to work your way to 10th. That's your sort of adventuring career.
Yeah.
And then you get sort of your leader career, and then you get this sort of final arc of like, now I embrace the final arc of
Yeah.
my thing. Yeah.
That's cool. The more you're telling me about this, the more this sounds like something right up my alley. I think
It does sound cool. Like you can kind of feel it out in the beginning where you're not too sure where you want to go, and
right.
then I mean 10th level you're kind of figuring out like, okay, I think this is more of what I want to do, and then you can actually like, so it kind of makes more sense to
It's
select
like,
the class that way.
you know, it's like you're going to high
Mhm.
school. You know, you're getting a good mix of all the subjects, and then
Yep.
you know eventually you major in something in college, right?
Yep.
I mean that it makes so much sense now that it's laid out in front of me. It makes me a little upset that another system hasn't done that already.
Well, this is product too of like the other point with the system being quite simple. When I was working at Wizards, I often like we would bring artists in for these concept pushes, or we would have people visiting,
Yeah,
and I would always have people like, "Hey, can you run a game for us?" Because even when I was on Magic, people knew I was a big D&D nerd.
sure.
So it'd be like, "Yeah, sure, I can run a game." But we would always use the simplest rules we could, and I used to use the pull it out of my butt kind of rules,
Yeah,
or be like like what do you want to play? It's like, oh, like I like this sort of paladin idea, but we had people who like, let's say you think of the players that you have, it's like um someone who's never played D&D before,
Mhm.
and their first language is not English,
Yeah,
right? And you're like, okay, well, what kind of rules do we want so everyone can have fun tonight and we can make a character pretty quick? So a lot of this came out of that thinking of
yeah,
like that we want something really simple. It's fun to build up, but the core of it's very simple to understand.
yeah.
And as you get, because you start simple, it also makes it a bit more like um, Minecrafty in a way, where it's
Sure.
like it's made of very simple components, but you can build the Taj Mahal if you want.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
That's so cool. And so what, you know, what are your end goals for this? Are you going to do like a Kickstarter crowdfunding thing for actual books, or are you going to use like a online publishing resource like what's the big one that everyone uses? Like I guess not
Oh,
DM's Guild maybe. Or
oh yeah, yeah.
one of those sites to publish it virtually, or are you trying to have like a nice bound book? Like, what are your guys' goals for this thing?
Our there's a couple things. There's a couple things to that. I think our ultimate goal is, or what we've been looking at, is Kickstarter.
Yeah,
Um,
okay, that'd be great.
and I have an old friend of mine too, John Shendahedi, who also used to be an art director on D&D. He was actually
Nice.
creative director on D&D before I moved over. So I knew John for years, and he's done a ton of Kickstarters. So he was like, "When you're ready to do a Kickstarter, call me." And I was like, "I will."
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I think ultimately it's a Kickstarter. One thing we also kind of wanted though was like, I think we want a nice, solid, good looking book.
Yeah,
But I I actually am kind of like, I don't want it to be too fancy. You know
sure.
what I mean? If you want that, if that's a thing, because to me it's sort of like to me it'd be really cool if it's like, oh, you get a lot of fun stuff, and it's but I don't want the price point to be crazy,
Yeah,
because I almost would rather like, yeah, have a cool book, and it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg either,
I mean, you
because
can always, the cool thing about Kickstarter is you can always have like that, S tier, pledge level or whatever, and have that
yes,
have some cool foil or something on it. But then,
yeah,
just make, the regular player's handbook or whatever it will be called, just look good with solid art. And,
yep,
I think making it accessible is, the best bet, right? Making sure people can get their hands on it kind of thing.
Taking the
yeah, because
opposite route of the 40K games,
Oh
like
my
you
God.
need a ton of money.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The
There's a
Warhammer
lot of
game is
things.
not great
lo-
for the wallet. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of things wrapped up in that too, where it's like, yeah, it's very expensive to get into, or maybe you need custom dice and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, there's fun things you could do, but there's something to me about tabletop games that has always been about like I just want to give them a lot of inspirations, give them a lot of ideas and some cool pictures and some simple rules and stuff and a little world plan. But I want to see what other people make,
Yeah.
like I want them to pull out their pencils and paper and their dice and play that stuff. Like there's a part with this to me that's really a lot about that. Um, like I'm not against, say, using your phone to do a thing, but to me, I'm a fan of like pen and paper, tabletop, you know,
Yeah.
that kind of experience, and it's like, yeah, I think that's what we want to make. We want to make something that's actually that thing,
And I think, as cool as technology has gotten, right? Like Christian and I, when we play Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or whatever, we're playing it a lot of times virtually on Zoom with
Mm-hmm.
Roll20. And, Roll20 is great because you can click a button and it does all the math for you. But,
Yep.
when we go to San Diego Comic-Con, it's not like we can play a pickup game of D&D very easily, right? It's like, okay, well, make sure everyone has a character sheet and, their books and, some dice and some terrain and minis and stuff. And it would be fun to get back to the basics where you could just show up at a convention, find a couple like-minded nerds, and just, start rolling some dice and having adventures. I think that would be fun to get back to, I think.
Yeah. And I think that to me is where the tech kind of comes in, where it's like, if I need a lot of tech to play a tabletop game, it begins moving the curve more and more towards like just a digital game, video game.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing is
So,
with the new the new D&D virtual tabletop. It looks like a video game now. It's going to be
oh
crazy.
yeah.
But I mean, I'm going to try it. They've definitely got me hooked. But at what point does it stop being a tabletop game and start just being a computer game?
Yeah. Well, we're kind of going the other Luddite route, which is like this way, which is like try to design the game to be simpler to play at the table.
Yeah. Well, it's not an RPG game, not necessarily, but there's this very popular game that's getting a lot of like buzz in the miniature wargaming section called, I think it's called Demon Ship. I think it's called. It's either Demon Ship or Ghost Boat. One of the podcasters,
Ghost Boat would be a great name.
It can't be one of the podcasters I listen to called it one over the other. I think it's Demon Ship. And what it is, because we were talking about like Warhammer 40K, where you have to have hundreds of dollars of minis and terrain and rule books and all this stuff. This thing comes in a little self-contained box with these modular pieces that magnetize onto it. And you can literally bring this one little box with you to a convention or say, and play either by yourself or with a couple extra people, and you're going through an adventure cooperatively. And so I like the idea of getting back to something that you can bring to a friend's house and easily pick up and play. I think, it's cool that we've gotten complex and advanced to do like crazy things and have and play virtually, especially like when the pandemic happens and whatnot. But it would be nice to get back to a point where like I could bring one book and we can all play a game together, or I can bring one little box and we can all have fun together. I'm excited to get back to that.
Yeah, that was one of the things we're looking at too when designing the rules. Was like, let's say you do have an ability that's like a spell or something. If you have a spell that's like, you can cast this, and it has a certain area of effect, but it doesn't have an effect on this, and it does a certain type of damage. So like the area of effect, the damage it does, the type of damage it does, all those things are what I would refer to as operators.
Okay.
So the more complex or the bigger amount of operators you have.
Oh, hold on one sec.
Oop.
Christian has a microphone issue where like sometimes 40 minutes into an interview, it starts echoing. But yeah, go,
You
go
gotta kick
ahead.
them out.
It's better now. Yeah.
Uh,
I thought we were gonna
Anyway.
make it the whole episode without it happening, and then
Yeah, it's like a fun little Easter egg now. People like to find the echoey part of the podcast.
I thought you were mocking me.
oh, we love doing that. Inviting a guest just so we can make fun.
Just
Roasted.
to mock them. Yeah, it's like, oh no, I fall into a trap. But anyway, yeah, that was one of the things we thought about with the mechanics, was to limit the sort of operators you're dealing with. Try to simplify those down. So that allows you, again, if you're a DM creating a monster or something, you can do it easily. Or if you're a player making a character, it's really just like, I want this, I want that, put this in there. That's super nerdy, but
no, it's super cool. I think that a lot of people don't realize kind of what goes into creating a game like that, and those are some of the decisions you have to make. Like do you go like down the road of like 3.5 D&D or Pathfinder, where every little thing has a stat block and a minuscule operation to it, where each rule is clearly defined? Or do you try to make it more accessible with overarching like mechanics that kind of let you tailor the experience to your preference, kind of thing, or to the adventure? That's super cool. Well, it's been awesome talking to you about this game and your career, and I can't wait to get my hands on this new RPG. It's called Ruttigers, right?
Ruttigers.
That's going to be the title of the first the game as a whole, or just a setting?
That's like the first game. Like the first, we'll put out the Ruttigers play test or field test or whatever called it, wherever we call it here when we get it done. But then the actual final book that we want to put out, I'm going like this, but it's actually not. It's like that. It's like is probably the Ruttigers Almanac, because
awesome.
We like the idea. The rules up front are actually pretty minimal. The rest of the book has a lot of different monsters. There's setting stuff. There's cool maps. And then if people like it, it's like, well, let's do the second almanac and the third almanac. But also we want to do like, let's do the next age of Witchcog, and stuff like that, or even a sci-fi thing, because like I said, I'm a world building nerd. I really, my ideal goal would be, my friend Matt is a physicist. His end goal is probably to take over the entire world.
Sure.
But I would rather just like make fun games and draw stuff.
There you go.
So he's the evil one. I'm just,
he's out here to have a good time.
I'm just trying to make fun stuff, man.
There you go.
Well, if you ever need test dummies to try it out, we're open.
We're always open to play new games. We love playing new games.
All right, I'll send you some. I'll send you some test stuff when we get a little solid pack.
Absolutely. And so,
and I've been dodgy about the date too, but it's because earlier I'd said, okay, we're gonna try to put out a play test here, but then I kind of pulled it, and I was like, no, we should fix some stuff first. So now I'm really leery of like, it'll be done by Tuesday. So it's coming soon.
Coming soon. Well, how can people find you, support you, like plug whatever will help this project along and help you along, whether it's Instagram or Blogspot or what have you. Plug whatever you want to plug, Richard.
Okay. Well, I would say just right now there's nothing to contribute to or anything like that, except I often Twitter is probably the spot. If you just Richard Whitters, or it might be Whitters Richard on Twitter, or whatever name I have there. My profile picture is Zavart, which I designed for D&D. But yeah, Whitters at Whitters Richard, WHITTERS on Twitter, and that's usually where I post updates about what we're doing with the game, and I just post drawings and other things on there. I do dumb polls, and I have pictures of my dog.
Excellent. That's all the stuff we like. Yeah.
I'm also on Instagram. That's just at Richard Whitters. Again, there I post just pictures of drawings and stuff and updates there. But yeah, I would say over the next few weeks, we're planning on putting out some more stuff, but our main focus is just trying to get to a play test.
Yep.
And then we basically just want people to spread it around and see if we can get some people to try it. And I will send you guys a play test as soon as we have like a package. I'll send you a PDF.
Yeah. We would love that. We'll play it, and we'll do whatever content you give us permission to do with it. But if it's just us playing it in a room together, we're totally fine doing that too.
Okay, yeah. Yep. And it's a play test too. So if there's parts of it where you're like, this part stinks, that won't hurt my feelings. I'm too old to have hurt feelings over that.
There you go.
Well, I mean,
calluses and leather at this point.
As an artist, it's like your soul gets cut. Like that part of your soul that's like, oh, my feelings get hurt. Like, no, that gets cut out of you in art school. Like, you can't hurt me. I've worked on a project for 20 hours and someone told me it sucked and I poured my soul into it. There's nothing left. Like,
I got a C on that project.
Yeah.
It's been like years and years of concept art. It's like, you can't hurt my feelings.
Exactly. Well, Richard, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come talk to us. It's been super fun, and I can't wait to play the play test and, see this game kind of come out. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for having me. It's been really fun.
Absolutely. And, go follow Richard on Twitter, and go follow us on Twitter too, at Nerds with Friend. And you can follow us on all the social medias, the Instagrams and the Facebooks and all that good stuff. And just make sure you like and subscribe this video if you're on YouTube, or the audio if you're on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Premium, or Spotify. We do appreciate it. Christian, as always, thanks for being the Sam to my Frodo. I do appreciate it. And to all the nerds out there, remember, you're not alone. You're with friends. This is Nerds with Friends. Thank you and good night.